I've written this document because I don't want to get nothing wrong. I want you to realize what I'm saying and listen to every word. You know, there was a time when black men didn't shoot one another, but kept firearms to protect the family from some outside forces. The Klan, other races, the mad, drug, or alcohol-fueled criminal set on invading our home or abusing our mother, our wife, or our sister. A time when, quote, hustlers were fathers, holding down a day job, doing some legit work on the side, weekends, even nights if necessary, to make ends meet. When a conflict between two men was settled, if necessary, by hands not so weak that they were unable to pull anything but a trigger. These were men, not little punks, those black boys common today who run for guns at the sign of any impending, quote, beef. Little bitches, in essence, who can't go to the corner store, to the funeral of a friend or a relative even, without having a gun tucked away in a car, away in the belt line. Punk-ass individuals who paired with their boys of similar bitch-ass consciences who claim to have one another's back. Little spineless individuals who fail to realize that if God doesn't have your back, all the 9mm, all the 38s, all the AK-47s or Uzis can't do anything to assure your future. And you have the nerve to call yourselves hustlers? Well, as we witness daily now, all you so-called hustlers are only filling cemeteries and jails, often fighting over a piece of turf not a one of you or your mother or father has a title to. And when you finally do get some true turf of your own, you're permanently residing 6 feet under it. While Congress is reviewing reports which show that the nation's prison industrial complex is 29.4% more profitable than slavery, the descendants of slaves in Washington, D.C. and in other urban areas throughout the nation seem to possess a mentality which would make their ancestors cringe and shame. Millions died so these fake-ass hustlers could have some semblance of freedom. Yet, they've turned on one another, little bitches with so-called beefs, taking lives and giving their own over to a prison industrial complex which, like slavery, only serves the rich. For my lifetime, I've attempted to impact the public mind, particularly the minds of my former peers, my extended family, my people. I spent my youth writing news, covering events for the Washington Afro-American newspaper, getting my pen tuned as editor of the Free Voice at the former Federal City College, penning poetry for reading in D.C. venues, and over the past 10 years, publishing 8 novels, books not only for your entertainment, but hopefully with some insights into our lives which might lead to some entertainment, some knowledge, perhaps even some wisdom. My first book, initially titled High Society, tracked the lives and deaths of a crew I refer to as the Boys from Ballou. Ballou is a high school in Washington, D.C. in the southeast section, the black section of D.C. From there, I went on and I wrote about a subject which I really love, the spirituality of some of us and how it correlates to current and sometimes foreseen future events. In the 1980s, I was working as a journalist and became privy to some information which was quite frightful. It seemed that in a subversive effort by some high government officials and military personnel to fund weapons for a U.S.-backed group set on overthrowing the Nicaraguan government, these officials, defying Congress, devised a plan to fund the Nicaraguan Contra rebels' weapon purchases through a scheme which came to be known as Guns for Drugs. In a brief descriptive, massive amounts of cocaine will be sold in South Central Los Angeles and further throughout major urban communities in America to fund the purchase of guns for the Nicaraguan rebels. Back then, our president was quoted as saying, "Hell, they're killing each other in Africa," and justifying his support of an effort to flood America's black communities with cocaine eventually be converted to cheap and readily available crack cocaine. I saw a major, disastrous calamity forthcoming and did all I could to do, along with countless others, to warn your mothers and fathers, grandmothers and grandfathers, that a deadly program was being designed specifically for America's teeming urban ghettos. Kind of a gentricide effort, really, but it was never really termed as such. The president and his minions could never be charged with crimes because there was a legal process back then which they termed plausible deniability. That meant they could deny legally that they had anything to do with this up in the upper echelons. Those that were in the lower level and taking this effort to task on the ground would never be called to task because they would never be known. But as many of the forewarned readily picked up the cheap, deadly cocaine, bent on either camouflaging their minds or the continuous, debilitating state they long resided in, or for the sellers, peddling the deadly substance to their own brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, in an often failed effort at pulling themselves personally out of the disastrous maelstrom, they picked it up. I mean, it was cheaper than saying, "Good morning, welcome to Macadee's, may I help you?" But in the long run, those who went to work for the devil, and I call them the devil because they were devilish in their pursuits, selling drugs where they were too late to realize that they were little more than victims themselves. Over the years, drug dealers and users alike did little more than populate cemeteries and jails. For not only did the Contras get massive supplies of weapons during the 1980s, guns for drugs manipulation, but so too did the nation's drug dealers. For not one could go on the streets nights selling thousands of dollars of drugs without being armed against potential marauders. The stick-up boys, familiar characters in my first novel, Anacostia or High Society, and others, they were ready for them, and they were ready for each other. And when one got a gun, another felt it paramount that he too got a gun. Then before you knew it, the whole damn urban landscape was flooded with guns. I got a gun, you got a gun, all guys chilling got guns. Despondent, I picked up a bottle, a pipe, a joint, for I too wanted to erase the vivid pictures being projected over the landscape with the bodies of a sister, a friend, a brother scattered among the carnage. I was really depressed. And when we get depressed, there's a liquor store on every corner in our community. There's a drug deal on every corner in our community. So we had no problem getting high. Despondent, I was very despondent. And I knew what deadly devastation would be visited upon the black community, and particularly by crack cocaine. But in writing about it, I let a friend who was battling crack addiction read my initial report. And he noted, quite frankly, that I didn't have a clue as to what crack was about. So I went out one night for a few years and found out. After a while and more than a few tragedies, I soon realized that I still had a job to do. My hustle, writing, informing the masses continuously, if even sometimes belatedly, of the dangers targeted towards them by the devil, by the very sponsors of your high. So I pushed on, wrote another spiritual book about foreseeing natural and man-made disasters. That was my book, not about crack. I wrote that one when I was a little toasted. But I wrote about the spiritual calamities that were awaiting all man that had done bad. This was called A Mighty Long Way. I did an analysis of global terrorism following the tragedies of 9/11, 2001, and wrote The Bank while I was still working at the World Bank. This took up the case of what would happen if terrorists hit America's communities. Matter of fact, before I even got to publishing it, I had to go in and put a disclaimer in it saying that, hey, I didn't know this was going to happen. Lord knows I didn't know it was going to happen. But basically what I told about in this book was things that were soon to occur. I wrote a massive tome also It was called Afraid of the Darks. This combined the spiritual view and the ground view of conflicts inherent in gentrification in Washington, D.C.'s historically black communities. That's a thing that's ongoing now. I did this years and years ago. Then I did another drug-related novel. Hey, did I relapse? I don't know. Probably did, if I remember correctly. It was centered around some Southeast Washington communities, which I am familiar with. It was called The 92. It was about what happens sometimes on the route of us drivers that go into our deep and dark black communities. My latest novel, I've written particularly for the young black so-called hustlers I spoke of in the beginning of this presentation. I really want to put this book into the hands of the young gunmen in our nation's urban communities, going around thinking they're all that because they just happen to have a gun. This is my latest novel, Hustling Backwards. It's available online at Amazon.com, preferably at my publisher, www.lulu.com. Or you can get further details and access to my other works on my personal website, www.ronaldrahanna, no periods or anything in that, Ronald R. Hanna, RONALD-RHANNA.com. I know a lot of you to whom I'm particularly addressing this to don't have time to read books nowadays, but believe me, you need to take the time and read this. I'm serious, you need to read this. Get a copy of Hustling Backwards, and I hope you can finish it before you get shot.